All right, and today our special guest is Polar Bear Mike from Team Allegiance. How are you doing, Mike?
What's up? I'm doing pretty good. How about you guys?
We're doing pretty good, pretty good. So this week we have a patch, and we waited to do our interview until after the patch notes this week, because last week was a little dumb having patch notes and not having Vedium there to talk about them. So we made a correction there. And this week, so we've got some balance changes, but I think the biggest thing is the new god. Mike, what are your first thoughts on this? What is it, Cernos? Is that how we say it? I don't know.
My first thoughts are that he has a pretty high skill cap. I think, as is kind of tradition with a lot of new gods, his numbers may be a little overtuned right now. I think his CC for a hunter looks absolutely insane. But yeah, other than that, just looks pretty cool, like a good addition to the game. And his one rewards like high level play a lot more than past hunters, like Izanami, where you kind of just like brain dead, clear at level 1 and 5 auto attacks.
Yeah,
I love the analogy, brain dead. It's
yeah.
just clear.
Speaking of the Claire, I mean, so his bringing up his passive is, when he's in like a melee range, enemies take double damage. Basically, they get hit by the a melee attack for, I think it's like what is it? We saw it was hitting for like, I think it was 23 damage on stream or whatever it was, and then. So it was like, what, 25% is what we said or saw?
25% is what they said. And
So
yeah, they said
that, how is that going to affect this, like, as a god, his viability in season 4? I mean, it sounds like he's going to have a lot of clear.
I think that's mainly just like a jungle buff clear thing. Because if you're on wave, if you're getting contested on the wave, or like in a team fight, you at least have to compromise your positioning in order to get that extra damage. So I don't think it's as strong as like Shablanque Bolas would be, for example, where you can get that proc from max range, and at least you have to be melee range. But it's definitely still really strong on buff camps, and if you do have dominant position on a wave, or you're like tanking a Gold Fury, it's just a little bit of extra DPS. So it's definitely strong.
I mean, this seems like it synergizes really, really well with like where we're at in like the season 4 meta, with the hyper aggressive, the dual lane contesting camps, stealing camps, and everything like that. Like this, him going into the jungle after he pushes you into tower is just gonna be dumb from the sounds of it.
His level 1's also going to be even more insane. Well, I don't know if you would get his. You probably wouldn't get his 1 at level 1, but if you get like his 2 and then his 1 at level 2, then not only do you have really good clear, but your auto attacks can also slow or do more damage or whatever you choose. And that's going to make him so insanely powerful at level 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to deal with him for a month at least.
Yeah, no
that's
kidding.
the positive. You don't have to deal with him for a while.
Probably not until LAN or so, I think, at this rate.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so then we've got his Bramble Blast, which is the single target root, but then it expands into like a field of damage. I mean, it looks like that's going to be, it could be used for zoning, because once it reaches max distance, or when it hits a target, it explodes, and then it does a root. Do you think, is that going to be a strong CC, or is that going to be something that's going to be, you could shrug that off?
It's definitely pretty strong, but I actually like that ability a lot because you can at least play around it pretty easily. Like since the initial route looked like it was a line skill shot, it's at least pretty easy to body block and manipulate who that route goes on in your team. Obviously, you get punished a little bit by the damage, so it's definitely strong. Definitely has a lot of like DPS, and it'll do a lot to waves, I think. But I like the ability. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and then he's got his Horn Charge. I feel like I personally was a little underwhelmed by it, because I thought it was like going to do more than just be a pass through and damage. How did you view that?
Yeah, I think so. On his 2, he actually has a root, and then the area around his root, like when it explodes, ends up being a slow. I think it would be better, like if they're choosing to have a heavy CC hunter like that, because he also has slows on his 1. I feel like it'd be better to move one of those types of CCs onto his 3, because the ability by itself kind of just looks like a dash, and that's kind of it. Like the damage doesn't even look like it's going to be that relevant, because there's no way that you level this ability before any of the other ones.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about it. Like, I was thinking so offensively that I was like, oh, right, hunters need escapes sometimes, so that's probably what that is. Not really. I mean, it's really quick, so it's got that like engage potential.
Yeah.
But yeah, had totally forgot like that was a thing that happens for hunters. All right, and then his Wild Hunt, which is a really cool ability because it adds polymorph to the game essentially, and everybody gets silenced and disarm. How big of an ability is this going to be?
That ability is absolutely insane. Like anytime you have a unique crowd control, like for example, when they first introduced disarms on Just Bologna, like back in season 2, disarm itself isn't even like that strong of a mechanic. I mean, it's definitely really strong, but anytime you add new CC that has limited potential to play around it and stuff, it just becomes so insane because it's the only god that has that type of CC. So there's so much higher value just because of that alone, and it becomes a lot harder to predict or play around against that god. And the damage on the ult also looks insane. So it's not just the really strong CC.
So I mean, this god's literally been out for what, a few minutes now.
Yeah.
As I mean, you're the support. Who do you pick up to really synergize with this early game? And then for team fights, what is the worst possible team you could look at as far as like having to play against? I mean, imagine like all of a sudden the SPL does away with pick and bans and they can choose whatever the hell they want.
I'm actually not sure like what combos off the top of my head would be really insane on him, but I think for like laning purposes and stuff like that, I think any god who, as like a guardian, if you have a guardian who struggles with like AoE CC, kind of like a Fafnir, like he only has single target stuns, I think this god could be like pretty insane with them because you have the single target combo because you can like Fafnir stun into his root, for example, but also in a team fight, you could like Fafnir ult, and then as Fafnir's ulting, you could have the Cerneros. I have no idea how to say his name, but you could have them like polymorph everybody to guarantee that they take the Fafnir damage, and then they'll take your ult damage, so they're just going to get completely nuked and CC'd at the same time. Like, there's some cool stuff like that, but I haven't really thought about absolutely everything yet.
Well, I mean, thinking about like, the combos and things like that, which kind of supports do you like kind of favor really right now? Not necessarily just for him, but like what's your favorite support in the current meta?
I'm not sure. I like a lot of them right now. I think there's a ton of variation in supports. I think mainly watching EU and some other teams like Noble, for example, or Memory of Gabe, they're like the supports range so much. Like some EU players will play like Emil's, he's been playing a lot of Ama. Frezzy's played Herc a bit. I think Ionic and Wubbin have been playing a ton of Geb. Sylvanas gets sprinkled in through there. So like I think the amount of god variety is huge. I've personally probably had the most fun on like Fafnir, Ama, and then I love playing Emir. But I guess it just kind of depends on the game and your comp.
Emir right now, like in the past, like because we cast Challengers Cup, and some of those players, like the walls and the ability really to just kind of control the game and the flow of things, Emir has kind of skyrocketed. Like I've always enjoyed playing him, but watching that level of play and the team synergy that kind of goes with it is one of the things I love doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's funny that you kind of went directly into who synergizes well with this new god with Fafnir, because I looked through all of like the games you guys have played so far, and it seems like you've kind of been favoring the Fafnir pick a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of just we've been experimenting with like heavy guardian comps. I don't think we've really found a style that we love right now, but in the past we were experimenting with running like a lot of Kabrak and jungle and stuff like that. And I think Fafnir is pretty cool in guardian comps because you obviously add a lot of CC and you also have the additional steroids so that you can boost up your team's damage if you're lacking in that department a little bit.
Yeah,
he's also just a safe god in general, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's that coerce is just a really powerful ability at whatever level you're playing at. I mean, especially in the late game, he just gets really hard to ignore. All right, so I guess while we have you here, we'll go into the actual kind of balance of the patch notes. Big thing with Flickering Ritual having its cost change from 750 to 1,000. Is that going to be a big difference in the late game?
I don't know if it's that big of a difference. Like, I think that change will more show up where if you're at like 20 minutes and maybe the game is within reach for both teams and you see the game that like that Gold Fury fight is going to break open the game for one team or another and start snowballing it. I think a lot of mage players or a lot of smarter players would end up just like backing the base, and instead of getting like a tier 2 or a tier 1 of an item, they would just get the Flickering Ritual, and then they're super strong in that team fight. I think that type of interaction will go down a little bit, but in the late game, people are still going to spam by the crap out of this, and it's still going to be really strong.
I'd just like to point out right now that, a couple weeks ago when we talked to Emilzy, we were talking about what could be done to Flickering Ritual because it had been used at that point to change so many games. Every single thing that we have mentioned has been applied to Flickering Ritual since then. And like the cost increase wasn't exactly what I had said because I had thrown out like a ridiculously high number. I think I said 1,500.
Yeah, you were like,
Yeah.
let's make it a
But
starter.
like, yeah, let's just double the price. But I mean, moving it up. I mean, I still think it's going to help a little bit. But all in all, I mean, I'm excited to see that we actually predicted the game right.
It is cool when we do things like that, especially with like Rallying Ritual, how they like change it up. It's like, hey, look, we do have good ideas. We're not as unintelligent as we think sometimes.
But
right.
while we're looking at the patch, how did you feel about the increase on Kuzin Bows, Nene Kappa, and I mean, of course, Shell Spike's now doing more.
I just want to point out, I like that as soon as you said Kuzin Bow, Divios appeared on Discord, and like it's like he was summoned.
He just messaged me. He legit just messaged me. He goes, his 2 is legit OP as I can't say the word now. That's it.
Yeah, no, his 2 is absolutely insane. Now, I think the changes are just gigantic because one is like initial release, Kuzin Bow felt pretty underwhelming in my opinion, at least because the 2 was so telegraphed. Like you could only use it when you weren't being CC'd, and it was really easy to have the enemy just like hold their cooldowns and not fire into you. But now that you can do it like mid knockup and all of that stuff, you can bait so much damage onto yourself and then just reflect it all back. And then the cooldown reduction is huge too. I think that the Nene Kappa buff with the minion damage, I actually think it's pretty underrated because that thing hits like 3 to 4 times every time you fire it.
Yeah.
So it can end up being like a 30 to 40 damage buff per rank. And just that damage alone, like even if you don't actually confirm that damage, just the threat of it means that people have to blow auto attacks or whatever into killing it, which means obviously you mitigate a little bit of damage. So it's definitely a really strong change.
So does this change kind of give him more footing in like in a solo lane capacity? Is that something we'll probably see more
I would
of?
guess solo lane. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten to experiment with him as much as I probably should, but he looks like his kit just feels like it fits the solo laner a little more. And I think the main reason for that is if you look at his alt, normally you want your support to have like a really good CC that your mage and your hunter can follow up off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you look at his alt, it's kind of just like mass disruption. I don't think you can plan like, I'm going to alt this person and you like thought off of it or something like that because it just throws them around so like crazily, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the mass disruption, I mean, it's more of like, you can use it to counter engage. You can use it to just like, all right, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna go engage, and whatever happens. Maybe we
it can
might
just be insane for zoning. Like if you're just at like a gold fury and you go stand at their mid harpy entrance and you just alt, like they just can't walk past you ever. Like even something like that could be really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and so then we had a few other changes. We had the anti-heal is now 0 on certain gods. So Odin, Serket. There was another one who I don't remember. Osiris.
Yeah,
they all have, they set your healing to 0. How big of an impact is that going to have? Because I think Odin already did it, but now you're going to have Serket is actually doing it for real this time, and now Osiris.
Yeah, I think it's a huge deal for Osiris. I don't know how much it's a big deal for Serket. I mean, it kind of impacts them all the same way, but I think it's a little bigger for Osiris because since his is like much like Odin, since his is a multi-target potential like healing reduction, if you're against like a Ra or something and they're standing in Ra heal, it should be pretty easy to hit multiple people in that. So then you reduce it on everybody. So I think the application on Osiris is probably a little more evident, whereas like Serket, most times you're going to be looking for picks with her alt, so especially on like soul laners, so I don't think it matters all that much. Overall, I think the healing changes have been pretty good this season. It's nice that they kind of accounted for this for Rod of Asclepius countering anti-heal because it was additive instead of working like this. So definitely a good change.
Okay. And I think that really does it for all the patch note stuff. I mean, there was the changes to X-Ball and Zhang, but
Rip Fatalis.
Yeah,
Rip Fatalis.
Yeah,
the price change on
Maybe.
Fatalis. I mean,
Yeah.
I still think it's going to be purchased on.
It'll be
a few
picked up for
characters,
sure, but I don't think people will rush it as much as they were in the past.
No, so I mean, the 150 gold, we were kind of that's pretty much like one wave, right? That's like one more wave hanging out there by solo. Like if you're just the ADC, that's
Yeah.
one more wave by yourself. So it's not like a ton more, but yeah, the rush of like maybe a third item. That's pretty much where we've seen it. We've seen like trans, boots, Fatalis. maybe now it's more of a fourth item or something.
Yeah, I mean,
like that.
now
So,
if you're going like the trans boots fatalis build, then your fatalis was only like 400 gold cheaper than somebody rushing Ickfall. So normally the purpose to get Ickfall is that you have a really good power spike and you can actually outbox people. But a 400 gold window isn't really that much to take advantage of that. Now that it's like, over 600, it's like 650. That's actually a big deal. Or is it? No, it's a 600. Yeah.
Yeah, but that makes sense though what you're saying though. I got you. The goal differential versus the power spike. Yeah, when you think about it that way, that's
It's like an extra minute of like Ickfall having an advantage, I guess. It's not all that much, but at least it's not just better always, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on from the patch notes, we're gonna get into our one-on-one questions with you. And first up is the softball we asked for everybody. How's ALG in the season so far?
Pretty rough so far. I think we're trying to figure out a lot of stuff like mid online split. I don't think we've probably put as much effort as we needed to into the online portion. I think we've kind of just been like focusing on ourselves and like what comps we like and what styles, and I think it's been a lot of experimentation. So kind of hard to tell how that'll translate for now, but it's still been pretty steady improvement, which is nice. A couple games and sets that we dropped that should have gone the other way if we played it a bit better, but that just happens.
How has it been with transitioning in MattYankee, like into not only like bringing him back into mid, but also just kind of incorporating him with the team?
Met's been pretty smooth to pick up. I think the nice thing about Met is that I don't know what the best word for it is, but he's kind of like a social butterfly, and he kind of gets along with everybody, so he's really enjoyable to be around. And also, the things about Met that are nice is you never have to question like if his mechanics are going to be on point. Like, he normally will hit all this stuff, and he has some pretty unique ideas, which I like. The things that we've tried to have him work on are like, figuring out where his comms fit into our team, like between me and Weekend and stuff like that. But overall, the adjustment's been pretty easy. I think we're still not quite where we'd like to be as a unit with like me, Met, and Weekend, but it's definitely been pretty fun.
It's one of those things, and I think you kind of touched on it, but like you said, he's kind of like a social butterfly and gets along with people, and I think that fits really well, especially because he's in the mid, because like everyone's in mid. Like everyone always comes over to mid. It's a little bit better than I feel like last season for the most part, because it's not constantly 3v3 in mid, but it has been changing. So I'm sure that that's actually helping a lot. And I think we have a question from the Reddit because we put this up just to see what anyone wanted to ask you, and they want to know, just on a real serious note, I mean, everything so far, you said it's been a little bit rough, but it's been kind of nice having everyone come in. But what are the main problems that ALG is facing right now? And how, like, do you guys plan to deal with them?
I think identity is our main problem, like how we want to play the game as a whole, which is like probably the worst problem you could have, right? Because it makes everything so complicated. It makes your comms complicated because you don't know like who's calling like what objective in a certain situation, or you don't know what god pool people are really favoring. So there's so many variables when you're working on a different identity or changing your identity. Yeah. And we're trying to grind through it pretty hard. Kabam has been really helpful with it, but I think it's just one of those things that are going to take, or is going to take a lot of time, and the bye week should help with that. But I think that by the end of the fall split, we'll still have like a ton of work to do in that department, because the game constantly changes. There's constantly patches and things that you have to account for. So I think it'll take like another month or so, and then we'll have a pretty solid style, and then I think we'll be in a much better spot if we keep working hard at it.
Hey, so PB, you brought up Kabam, and I kind of want to. I saw you guys tweet out, I think like a week or two ago, I guess, that he's like the official coach now. I guess what does it mean to have a coach that's just dedicated to watching your games and really trying to observe, and what does a coach really bring to the team aspect? Because I know a lot of teams really don't have one, and maybe a lot of people don't really understand what a coach's role is supposed to be, in those lines. So I guess that's kind of a question, since you brought up Kabam, like, what has his effect been there?
Yeah, coaching in general is interesting, I think, because I feel that the entire Smite scene as a whole underrates it a lot. When I was first brought into the Pro League with Eager, I had Kret, and Kret was, they were living in a team house. Everybody but Omega and myself were living together. So it was really easy for Kret to like keep an eye on everybody, make sure their practice was good, make sure that everybody's getting along. And it was such a huge benefit. Like, it just gives you somebody who can help with the team environment. That's what Kabam is great with as well. Like, he has competitive experience as a player. He knows that if you give criticism to a certain player in a bad way, that it may affect their performance. So he knows how to handle everybody's attitudes, and it's been really helpful. And the nice thing about Kabam is we actually had him as our coach on Envy as well, but he, just like the way that unique situation was and like the time he was at personally, I don't think he got to commit as much time to it. And now that he is allowed to commit a lot more time, we've definitely seen a lot of improvement from him, or as a result of picking him up.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you could tell, obviously, you guys had tweeted out, hey, we got our wins. And it was after Kabam had officially, I guess, become coach or whatever, and you guys really performed well.
Yeah.
So you can see how, those games were different.
Yeah, I mean, he was with us before, but like, I think that week was when we finally got his contract finalized. So, I mean, everybody gets more motivated when they're, contracted to do something when it's your job, right? Like, everybody's way more motivated. So he definitely put in a ton of work that week, and it helped us so much.
All right. So speaking of kind of like team environments and like synergy and all of that goodness, I feel like we got to ask you, your take as a player on the whole Benji E United thing. That was a huge thing last week. People on all sides, High-Res should have given them the exemption. No, it was on the coach and the players for not, knowing about their subs. Benji's a dick. Benji did what he had to do. Like, what are your thoughts on that whole situation? I mean, obviously you can be vague and hands off if you want, but
no, I mean, that got blown up pretty hard. I think my stance on it is kind of that he came off as a dick to the public because of the timing of all of it, right? Just because it was the day of the lockout. And I think from a player perspective, I don't really hold that against him at all, because, an opportunity to join another team could come up at any moment. And if he personally saw that as an upgrade for himself, which obviously he did because he moved to E United, I don't really think you can fault a player for taking that, because I don't think it's any better to it's just as unfair to Russian Poppy, for example, or Aruzis, if they were to use him on Wednesday or on Thursday, excuse me, and he knows that, because the lockout is like Wednesday morning or whatever. But anyways, if he knows that he's getting replaced and they're using him anyways, then it's kind of unfair to him, because he doesn't have as much time to find a new team, or he doesn't get to practice with a new team, or I don't know what his situation was. I don't think that was at play here, but just for example. So I think if you're a player, you kind of have to look out for yourself and take whatever opportunity you feel is best for you. So I don't really hold it against him at all. I do think that the rule with, submitting subs or a different roster after the lockout probably should have, I guess, a contingency there or something like that's if, no other roster changes happened, or if no other roster swaps or trades or whatever transpired there. Because it does kind of suck that they knew that they didn't have a soul laner on Wednesday, but because the deadline has passed, they can't add anybody. And then, the thing is, people were treating Soar like they were completely unprepared for it, but most teams only check in like one sub, and they had 2 checked in. And it just happened to be a week where neither of them were able to play on Sunday, which is a super unfortunate for them. So, or I guess one of them was Nalissa, and they didn't know that she was going to get the Elevate spot, right? Because she played with them against Dignitas, I think, on Thursday.
She had let them know, this is a thing that is happening.
Right.
This is a thing that could happen. I am trying out all of that. And Freight has harped on this.
Well, that's why they got
most.
Sam, right?
Yeah.
That's why they got.
I think they've had him the whole time, but then it becomes a thing of communication, because he went on vacation, and vacations aren't generally a thing you plan 2 days in advance. So I mean, that's where the communication things kind of come in. And so we're getting down. I was originally going to get down to the last question, but this kind of brings me to a thought that I've kind of had talking with other esports scenes and people in those different between League and Dota. Is, do you think that Smite esports as a whole kind of needs a little bit of a maturing process, because you said
yeah, for sure,
there's a coaching, people, a lot of teams don't have coaches, that's something that needs to be and you guys know from firsthand experience last year around the whole Incon controversy is that having just like a team manager that's like the spokesperson, like where the players, I think that one of the things that makes Smite and the community of Smite great is that the players do have such a such a presence within the community itself, and they're always engaged. But there also needs to be that level, like that line in the sand of professionalism, where like some things need to be announced by not the players, because that kind of takes a little bit off their back. Like, what's your thought on that?
I think this is actually an interesting conversation, because I have this with like a bunch of my friends, like Baskin or whoever. We've talked about this the past couple of weeks, especially with like the Benji thing, and I feel that the whole professionalism in Smite, I think people kind of gear it towards the wrong thing. They gear it towards like the professional players themselves being like too young or immature, and that is kind of a variable, but that's that's just around gaming in general, because there are kids getting into like COD or Halo at like 16 years old, 15 years old. Like that's just present all the time. I think the main issue in Smite, and the reason you see the lack of professionalism and the immaturity, is that not only do they have such a big presence in the community, but it's also that they have a big presence in the organizations, because players completely control the rosters for the most part. Like most orgs are pretty hands off, because they just trust the players to know what's better in terms of making a roster swap and what player will be better for the team and stuff like that. And because players do have such large control, and because so many contracts only last like a split, for example, like this year I think both us and Luminosity have longer term contracts than other teams, so we're going to have we should be expected to have a lot less roster turnover, and then it makes the scene a little more professional. People get teams that they can root for an entire year. You can actually watch growth from an actual team and not just growth from individual players. So I think when orgs have a bit more control, you see the professionalism go up, because they also are the ones handling the roster swap announcements and all this other stuff, and I think it just becomes a little bit cleaner. So I'd like to see Smite move in that direction. And then of course, like the coaches and everything like that, a lot of people just give their sub spots to like their best friend, and they don't actually have people who are assisting them as a sub and using like the actual 6-man roster spot to be a benefit to the team and watch all their games and so on.
So we need to find some coaches out there, is what you're saying. We need to find them people.
Yeah, for
we need
sure.
to find the managers. So if you're out there, if you're trying to manage a team, get yourself going together and start with an amateur team first off, I guess.
All right, so like really quick, yes or no answer, I guess, for this is like, do you think that change needs to come from within the community, within the orgs, within the players, or is that something high-res should have their hand in, like trying to like shape?
I think a little bit of both. I think for the long term, it can't come from high-res, because in the long term, it kind of has to be everybody recognizing that there is room for improvement as far as professionalism goes, and then they can address it themselves as they move on. But I think if people want an immediate change, like for example with the whole Benji thing, if people decide this shouldn't be possible, this has such potential to screw over a team, and it's really bad PR for the SOAR org or for E United or whoever else, however people's stances on that unfold, if people want that type of stuff to change, that has to come from high-res altering the rules, because we're just playing by the rules that we're given, right? So
yeah,
unless they change that, we're just going to have to look out for ourselves and our team's best interests.
All right. And then the final thing is, so we put this up on Reddit, and one of the first responses we got was actually from MLC Stealth. He wants first off, I'll read it to you.
Read verbatim.
Verbatim. To Mike. Why are you a big poo-poo head meanie? Also, looking forward to hanging out at LAN. Grudges are boring. Thumbs up.
Stealth's a good man. That's pretty funny. I don't know. There was so much drama about the twit longer with Stealth, and I think like a week and a half or so ago, we unfollowed each other after that stuff. We were just being so like immature about it, and then I refollowed him back, and I DM'd him, and I explained everything, and we were just laughing at the whole situation.
Yeah.
And we're on good terms now, which is cool.
That's good to hear.
Typical, bro.
I feel like a lot of again, going back to the whole players being in the community thing is the firestorms that kind of get spread and started in the community. I mean, the Incon event was a month-long thing, and it branched out. It got Duke's
all the way to
it
Worlds for sure.
It got DM Brandon in it. It got just this huge thing. It was why? Why did it need to blow up this much? This is dumb. And then you still see Fallout. You still see Fallout from that. Everyone saying that Flashpoint is terrible, the worst team ever. And it's You're not even
yeah,
watching
no,
the games.
The weekend backstab thing will last forever,
Yeah.
just from the Incon events,
Yeah.
season 3.
And I think Weekend actually has like the best way of embracing things like that, because the
Oh, he
667
goes
thing
full
happened too. Like
sellout,
he's
full
like, all right, yeah, fine. Like
I'm actually still
emote
mad
now.
about that, because that meme was born by us on Eager stomping them, and like he had like that damage in like 20 minutes, and then he makes money off it. I was so mad about that.
Yeah, man. You gotta
All
love
right,
it. You gotta love Weekend.
we're at time. Thank you, Mike, for coming in. It was a pleasure talking to you. Here's you. You have the floor. Is there anything you want to say? Final thoughts, final comments, shout outs, or anything like that?
Just shout outs to Allegiance as an org, and of course you guys and the entire SPL and Hi-Rez. They've been handling season 4 pretty well so far, so I'm excited for all that, and excited to keep going on with the season and see how everything changes and how my team progresses. And thanks to everybody for if you are an ALG fan, thanks for supporting us, and if you're not an ALG fan, thank you for spamming Weekend. I find it hilarious.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Mike. Good luck in the coming weeks. Obviously, this is your bye week, so you guys rest up, kind of get all of your, some more experimenting time, and best of luck going forward.
Yeah,
All right, appreciate
you
it.
coming by.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.